Hello, everyone, and welcome to another Talking Feds one-on-one. In the flurry of activities to redo or gut the executive branch, President Trump last week fired the head of the Consumer Finance Protection Bureau, Rohit Chopra. And there's been some talk of what would happen in the wake of that. But the CFPB has been something of a conservative hit list for some time. And I wanted both to talk about what we're losing by having it being apparently disempowered and what it's done for the American people. So we have the perfect person for that. Rich Cordray was the initial director. He's also a really very dear lifelong friend from clerking days. So very pleased to welcome Rich Cordray.
Good to be here, Harry.
So, let's start with a little bit, both in your tenure and that of Chopra's, and if there's anything to mention about the 4 years when Trump 1.0. But tell us a little bit about what hole in government the CFPB was designed to fill, and how it has done that, what its sort of record was up to the present.
Sure. And the CFPB was enacted by Congress. It's a statute, it's a law of the land that there shall be a Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. And there's about 150 pages of statute with all kinds of shalls and requirements as to what parts of the Bureau should be and what functions they have. And much of that is mandatory. So it's law of the land, has been since 2010 when it was enacted. I became the first director. There was some back and forth with the Senate over confirming me, but I became the director in 2012 and served until 2017. Under the first Trump administration, I held over for 11 months and then gave way. Ultimately, they had Kathy Kraninger as the director, who was confirmed by the Senate and served a term. The Consumer Financial Protection Bureau was created when we had the huge financial meltdown that blew up the economy back in 2009, 2010. And if you remember at the time, there was a meltdown in the mortgage market, all kinds of subprime, terrible mortgages that people could not afford. That should never have been taken out in the first place. There was no regulation of the mortgage market at the time. And part of the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau was to see that the mortgage market was overhauled and made safer for American families who are buying homes, almost always with a mortgage. And so the Consumer Bureau was created to protect consumers in the financial marketplace. There's a lot of complex products that people don't necessarily understand. There's a lot of fine print. There's a lot of problems people can get into. So this has to do with mortgages, credit cards, student loans, auto loans, payday loans, all kinds of financial products. And the point of the Bureau is to put in place basic rules of the road so that the market can function appropriately and to protect consumers from being taken advantage of, which has happened many times over the years in significant ways and happens on a daily basis. And one of the things about the Bureau is that it has a complaint function that's required by the law. And over the years, the Consumer Bureau has answered millions of individual complaints and worked with the banks and financial companies to get those complaints taken care of, get people redressed when they've been treated wrongly, when the laws have been violated, get them their money back when it's been wrongfully taken from them. And that's been a very important function of the Bureau.
And look, you just read in the papers that it's a bureau that has really somehow gotten under the skin of Republicans. It's kind of on the chopping block, either for very dramatic regulatory changes or maybe, in effect, elimination altogether. What is the big beef that so many Republicans have had with the CFPB?
Well, to be honest, Harry, and we've talked about this before, I don't really understand what the fundamental beef here is because people get cheated in the marketplace all the time and they They come from red states, they come from blue states. They may be conservatives, they may be liberals, they may be Democrats, they may be Republicans. People of any kind can be cheated on a daily basis. And this Bureau is meant to right those wrongs. If you look at it from the standpoint of law enforcement, it's a law enforcement bureau. It makes sure that people don't violate the law to get an advantage in the marketplace. Who does that help? It helps consumers most of all. But it also helps all law-abiding businesses who don't want to be undercut by someone who cheats to get an advantage over them. And the vast majority of businesses in this country are law-abiding, and they do well with a even-handed regulator. So, some of this is just ideological bias against the government. Some of it may be mistaken, I think, siding with the banks and thinking that they shouldn't be oppressed by government when all it really is meant to do is make sure they abide by their legal obligations the same as everybody else. So, I'm not sure I fully understand all the animus here, but it is true that if you look at financial agencies in the federal government, under the Democratic administrations, they tend to be empowered. Under the Republican administrations, they tend to be disempowered to some degree. But generally, you'll still see protection of consumers all over the country by state attorneys general in red states and blue states. It's a basic law enforcement principle, as I said.
I mean, I know that even Trump ran wanting to cap, for example, interest rates on credit cards, which really can be dizzying and ruinous in a way. It's hard to understand all of a sudden compound interest and you wind up owing your house to the bank. Rich, can you just talk about one or two kind of banner achievements that you had in your time at the Bureau, and to the extent you know, how Chopra kind of took the baton and advanced things during these last 4 years?
Sure. Again, one of the biggest jobs we had at the Consumer Bureau when I started there as the first director was to fix the mortgage market, which was badly broken, and to make sure that people couldn't get hurt and lose their homes and really lose their life savings when they lose their homes. As had happened over and over again during the financial crisis, we saw it in my home state of Ohio. We had Save Our Homes task forces county by county across the state because this was such a big problem, and the Consumer Bureau cleaned it up to the point that the Mortgage Bankers Association and realtors have supported the Bureau when it's been under challenge because they like the fact that it has this safe set of rules that they can follow and that protect their markets so that it actually works effectively. Another major achievement was to set up that complaint function so that on an everyday basis, people can file complaints. They generally don't. Where do you go when you're getting cheated? You go anywhere you can, local government, state government, federal government, but the CFPB is the place you can go to get your problems fixed in the financial marketplace. And it's happened over and over again. That's a major achievement. And there's been some enforcement actions that were really needed. If you remember when Wells Fargo, it turned out Wells Fargo's top executives maybe didn't even quite realize that many of the people at their bank under pressure to meet their goals had opened fake accounts in people's names and charged them fees. And that was a major enforcement action. And by the way, under Donald Trump's first term, there came a point where it was clear that Wells Fargo had hurt consumers to the tune of $1 billion. And President Trump tweeted at the time, Wells Fargo needs to be addressed. And the Consumer Bureau stepped up and levied $1 billion penalty against Wells Fargo because these things happen and they should be fixed for people. Another thing the Consumer Bureau did was to take all that fine print. If you close on a credit card, you get a 20, 30-page document with all kinds of this and that's in it, and to be able to simplify it so that people could see the key terms right up front and not get confused and be able to compare products and shop and get the best deal, which is a basic consumer goal.
I mean, in your point, if I'm a law-abiding bank, and it makes sense to try to be law-abiding, a shyster, it might be the legal term, next door who is cutting corners will be able to offer a cheaper product, and consumers may not necessarily know the difference. So I know it wasn't your bailiwick. I remember in those first years when you were doing it, you had, if you and I went to the dinner, you would have binders of easily, a foot and a half tall that you would then go and pour over afterward. I thinking that you kind of set the agency in motion. It's quite a feat to stand up an agency in the first instance. Do you have a sense of Rohit Chopra had worked with you some? Isn't that correct? And I don't know if you've been in touch with him in the last few years or followed it. You've been taken care of, and another you're the Herculean figure who has to clean out the stables, but they put you in charge of student debt under the Biden administration. What has been the main thrust and lookout of the Bureau in the last few years, if you know?
Oh, well, I'm actually pretty close with Rohit Chopra. He was the student loan ombudsman when I was the director of the Bureau. We worked closely together on all kinds of student loan issues, including enforcement actions against failed for-profit schools such as Corinthian and ITT. And we put together the college scorecard and college shopping sheet at that time. You know, Rohit is endlessly creative and full of energy. And he was a very effective director of the Bureau over the last 4 years. And they picked up where we had left off and undertook more changes to protect consumers where they were being hurt. One was overdraft fees. Another was junk fees of all kinds that get attached to financial products and people don't really understand. But suddenly it's $4 here and $8 there, and it adds up to real money that people really can't afford. Those were the kinds of things Rohit was taking on. Medical debt that is often completely confusing to people. They don't really know if they owe a medical debt or not because they go to the doctor and they come away and there may be a copay, there may be insurance, maybe there's multiple insurance that could cover it. They don't know. And then months later, they find they have a bill. And these were being used to ding people's credit reports, millions of people to ding their credit reports so that they couldn't get a mortgage or couldn't get other products. And those were the things that the Consumer Bureau was dealing with under Rohit's tenure. And by the way, there's a new nominee for director of the Bureau, and that nominee, when confirmed, will be confronted with new challenges in this marketplace because, as we have said already, there's plenty of law-abiding businesses who know that if they just treat their customers well, it's a long-term relationship and they can do just fine by selling them good products at a fair price. And then there are others who will come and undercut them in the marketplace. They might get away with it for a while, probably won't last over the long term, but it's get rich quick, fly by night schemes. And those are the things that should not be allowed to happen. And it will fall to the new director to police that marketplace and make sure that consumers are treated fairly. And, you know, it could be members of your family, could be friends of yours, could be colleagues at work. Everybody's a consumer. Everybody is vulnerable from time to time.
Talking Feds is supported by the Brennan Center for Justice. In this new political era, the Brennan Center will do what they do best: defend the Constitution and the rule of law. They're prepared to fight against presidential overreach and will continue advocating for reforms to resist weaponized government, stop billionaires from corrupting our elections, and ensure every eligible American has the freedom to vote. Stay informed by visiting brennancenter.org.
I have to say that complaint line, I mean, everyone's been in the position. There's a problem. You think you're right, and just even trying to get a phone call in to state your case can be, tear your hair out, difficult. So your expectation then, Rich, is that there are some agencies, I think, that people fear, maybe USAID, are effectively going to be shut down and even their records kind of expurgated from history. But your at least expectation is there'll be a new nominee in that position and the full panoply of regulatory actions will continue. Is there some way in which you would expect in a change of administration certain priorities to be reduced and the like, or you think all the good things you've mentioned people should, unless proven otherwise, expect to just abide?
Well, I'll just say under the first Trump administration with Director Kraninger there, they continued to function, and they did all the basic things that the Consumer Bureau is required by law to do. They took enforcement actions when people were violating the law. That's what you're supposed to do. You don't just let people get away with things. That's not the way the government's supposed to work. They also supervised financial institutions. They had sent people in to kind of look at what they were doing. By the way, in many ways, that's very helpful to the financial institution itself, because they may not know all of the problems that they may have, and those can get worked out in a sort of agreed fashion. And that's very helpful, as well as making sure that they treat their customers right. And also under Director Kraninger, they continue to do financial education, which is badly needed across this country. A lot of people just don't understand these products, and they need more insight. They continued, as I said, to take complaints. And I would expect that to happen here again, because again, this is law of the land. But we seem to be in a different mode right now, where if they can tear something up and render it beyond repair, then maybe they can look at it and say, oops, we just won't be able to have a functioning Consumer Bureau. That's not
I mean, let me ask. I know you're not in the political fray. You're in the, business of making government work for people, but you were championed in the initial position by Senator Warren, and you probably saw that last week there was a demonstration that she led in front of your old building, basically either protesting or raising an alarm about what happens now at the CFPB. I just wanted to ask if you have a sense of what concerns people now and how we might follow from the outside. So much of this is hard for ordinary non-government folks to actually see what's going on, but how one might follow from the outside to know if the Bureau is remaining healthy or not.
Well, certainly a lot of bad things are done in secret and under the table, so to speak.
Yeah.
And so shining a light on what's happening, sounding the alarm, bringing it to people's attention so that they understand what's at stake, I think is incredibly important. There's also, the courts are going to be involved here as well, and they've gotten involved over the past week. There's an injunction in place now by the District of Columbia Federal Court not to fire any more people, give the court time to look at what's happening with the funding and the data of the agency, and to make sure laws are being followed. Because
I just stop you there, because I think people will be curious about it. So first, there was a court case you were involved in, and it looks as if it's not constitutionally assailable for Chopra himself to be fired, but it sounds like you're talking about a different stratum of folks. And then second, this has been a kind of theme that I'm just learning about, but the trend within some offices of the administration literally to just get rid of information, vaporize it as if it hadn't existed. So it seems like that's part of this lawsuit as well. Am I right about that? And what is the concern of the plaintiffs? You can't just come in and say, we're worried about stuff. They must have something they're citing. Again, I know you're not involved on the ground, but perhaps you're aware of the concerns.
Well, look, I'll just say there's lots of laws on the books that protect information that the government has as records of its work and as records in the area of its expertise. So in the Consumer Bureau, there's lots of information about consumer complaints that have been handled, enforcement actions that have been taken, supervisory work that has been done at the banks to make sure they're complying with the law. And that information is protected. It's protected on behalf of whom? On behalf of the public, because it's the public to whom the information belongs to, and the public that can make use of it. And so the court has rightly stepped in there, I think, to call a screeching halt to any efforts to destroy information. They've also stopped them from firing people who are protected under the law. But if you
and by the law there, you mean the whole, since they're not the head of the whole Merit Systems Protection Board, like so many other people are protected, career.
Yeah, the vast majority of the employees are protected employees. Now
have they tried? And one quick question: has the administration moved to fire them?
The Bureau has about 1,750 employees. Mm-hmm. There were about 70 who were new employees in the last year or so, and they were let go. That's permissible. They are not protected under the law. There were some term employees that were let go, about 100 of those. I don't know exactly what the legal requirements are there, but apparently they thought they had more latitude. We'll see. But the rest of the Bureau, still we're talking 1,600 people, have full protections under the law and cannot just be ousted unless there's good cause for them to be ousted. And these are the things that we were starting to worry that they were going to cross those red lines. And the court has stepped in to say, stop, we're going to take some time. We're going to look at this, slow down. Don't just go blundering in with a meat axe. That's not appropriate. That's not lawful. And it does not live up to the president's required constitutional role to take care that the laws be faithfully executed, which is what the president is supposed to do.
So right now, there's a judge in DC who said, screeching halt, as you say, so we can figure this out. There are people at the Bureau who are not of this very top stratum who are saying, you can't get rid of me. I don't know if they've been fired yet, but now it will fall to the court to determine if it's lawful to get rid of them. And then from there, the administration, if it wants to, can appeal, etc. Is that the basic state of play?
Yeah, I believe that the court will be asked and presumably will say that the law protects this and that, it protects this data, it protects these employees. And you cannot simply knock them aside and grind them underfoot, which is what perhaps some were urging be done. People like Elon Musk with his, quote, delete CFPB and his tombstone emoji. Right. Those are big talk, braggadocio things, but they aren't consistent with the law, and they're not consistent with the president's constitutional duty to take care that the laws be faithfully executed. And the courts will have a lot to say about that, I believe. But I also think the public will have a lot to say. It's one thing, it's unfortunate about AID, but in part, the issue is, who is it protecting? It's protecting a lot of people overseas. But we're talking about American citizens, your neighbor on either side of you, where you live, the people in your community. They're the ones who end up getting mistreated by financial companies and have no recourse unless the Consumer Bureau is in place. And so to tear that down is to create a lot of risk that the administration would be exposed to for the next Wells Fargo fake account problem, or the next credit card add-on selling air because it's worthless products that were enforcement actions for the Bureau.
Rich Cordray, thanks very much for at least sketching out what's at stake. There's so much happening all at once, but we'll try to keep our eye on the fate of the Bureau, and hopefully you can, as things develop, you can come back and talk to us a little bit more.
I was gonna encourage you to do that, because again, shining a spotlight on some of these things will stop some bad things from happening. I think you're doing a real service here.
Thanks for tuning in. If you enjoyed this video and other Talking Feds content, please take a second to like and subscribe. Talk to you later.